All right, guys, welcome into the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi. This one just went final in Tuscaloosa as Alabama rolls over Tennessee 52-24. Seems like much more of a blowout when you look at the final stats and the final score than what this game really was indicative of throughout the majority of this game, Matt. But a pretty significant battle from the Volunteers on the road for what seemed like 2.5 quarters at least. I want to get your initial thoughts before we really break things down.
Yeah, I'm anticipating that a lot of the folks in the comments tonight are, look, a win over Tennessee is a big deal for Alabama fans. They're always going to celebrate that. I think there's going to be some frustration from the fans after this one. I think it's a game that everybody came into tonight thinking that Alabama would very easily win this one. And to be fair, they did win by the expected margin. I mean, they covered. So there's not going to be maybe that many unhappy fans, but Alabama fans had to sweat through more of this game than I think they're comfortable with. I think they were not expecting Tennessee to be competitive in this game. And some of that is probably because a lot of folks haven't been paying attention to what Tennessee's doing this season, but also this was not Alabama's best performance. I think this was a little bit of a step back after what we saw a week ago against Mississippi State.
Yeah. So 52-24 the final. Alabama scores 28 points in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter was really not even a game at all. Alabama really rolled beginning kind of in the third quarter into the fourth. Let's talk about the positives first. Before we kind of break it down, some miscommunication issues when it comes to the defense. But, Matt, one thing that really stands out that we talked about in the pre-show is that Tennessee rushed for just 64 yards. And this is a team that ranks 5th in the country in their run game. That in and of itself is a pretty impressive stat when it comes to, executing at least part of the game plan for the Tide defensively.
For sure. I think watching this Alabama defense tonight, it would be very easy to focus on the negatives and be frustrated with this performance because ultimately you give up 24 points. You remember the touchdowns, but this offense moves at a very fast pace, and they played a lot of possessions tonight. And ultimately, on a per possession basis, this was a good performance defensively from Alabama. Like you mentioned, Simone, you hold a very effective ground game to 64 yards total rushing, particularly Hooker, the quarterback, who was so dangerous a week ago against Ole Miss. He comes away with just 12 carries for 26 yards total tonight. That's nothing. He was not able to hurt Alabama with his legs tonight, and that's a big deal for Alabama. But the other part of this, too, is this actually has been a very efficient passing offense for a lot of the year, too. These guys have put up a ton of points on their opponents that they faced this year. Sure. 24 probably looks like more than Alabama fans wanted to give up, but ultimately 19 of 28 for 282 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception from Hooker, the Tennessee quarterback. An okay performance, but this is actually well below the standards for Tennessee for what they've been doing for a lot of the season.
Yeah, if you're just tuning in, it's the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Matt Scalisi, Simone Eli. Matt, you just got a comment here from Bruce who says, "Don't sugarcoat it, Matt. Our defensive backfield looked like they stepped in and doggy do." And so, I want to make it very clear. We're talking about the run defense here. We're talking about stopping the run. We want to get to the secondary now, Matt. There were some communication issues, and it seemed like Alabama giving up the big play in a game against Tennessee is a problem, and a game against a team like Georgia is a loss.
No question. I will say this. I'm not going to. I don't think sugarcoating it is the right thing to do in this situation because these are experienced players in the secondary for the most part. This was supposed to be the unit of the team that was bringing back a lot of game experience and was going to be a strength for this team. And they looked lost during Tennessee's 3 touchdowns tonight. They were all big plays. They were all busts in terms of the defensive backs not knowing where they were supposed to be on the play. So it's not a matter of, going up in the air and getting beat one-on-one by an elite receiver. That's not what happened on any of these plays that Tennessee scored on tonight. the Bama secondary didn't know where they were supposed to be. They were not communicating correctly to each other. And I think some of that is fair to say these defensive backs are not getting it yet, and they're not executing the defense at the level that they're expected to. Mm-hmm. I also think at a certain point, it's probably worth saying some coaching adjustments need to be made. If we're this far into the season and these guys still don't know where they're supposed to be, that's kind of what those guys get paid the big bucks to do, is to make sure these DBs do know where they're supposed to be. Yeah. So there are some failures happening in terms of coaching and assignments for this secondary at this point. But we did see, as the game went along, I think, on a more consistent basis, Alabama was playing good defense. It was these single big plays that really kept this game close for way longer than it should have been. There's no question who was the better team in this game tonight, but Alabama allowed this game to stay close for a really long time by having just a handful of blown assignments that, they have the talent to shut this Tennessee defense, this Tennessee offense down a lot more effectively than they ended up being able to do tonight.
Yeah, we'll get to more on the Bama offense in just a minute, but I want to talk quickly, Matt, about the concerns that this is something that I feel like when I watch Alabama play, for there to be such a slow start, to get the gears working and going. This isn't a situation where you can blame it on 11 o'clock kickoff. It's not a situation where you can blame it on you're playing an opponent that's not a significant opponent. I mean, this is a rivalry game. The 6 o'clock kick at Bryant-Denny Stadium has all the things you could possibly want. Guys should be up and ready for this game. And it seems as though it came out flat, came out a little confused at times, a little lost at times, trailed even. That's concerning when you're forward thinking, when you're looking down the road, in that there are teams much more talented than Tennessee, heck, even Auburn, who I think will make you pay if that's the sort of situation. That's kind of how you look coming out of the gate.
For sure. I mean, think about what the environment would have been like if Alabama got off to a slow start like they did tonight in Jordan-Hare Stadium against an Auburn team. Question. I mean, it's hard to recover from if you have a bad first quarter on the road. We saw exactly what that looks like a couple of weeks ago at Texas A&M. So this is an issue, having the intensity at the start of the game. I mean, we're pretty far into the season at this point, and Alabama has not had a bye week yet. So the bye week probably coming at a really good time for this team. They need a rest. They need to recompose themselves a little bit. They're going to be playing a very unpredictable LSU team when they come back from the bye, a team that has a lot of talent but is playing, a completely different style of football than they have for most of the season. We've seen them start to sort of revert to a more run-heavy game. So I think looking ahead for this team, yes, they're going to play teams with a lot more talent than Tennessee had out there on the field tonight. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I know we are all looking ahead at Georgia and how that game looms. But, I think Alabama is not playing with the urgency they need to play with for every possession. I think for as much talent, especially as the offense has for Alabama, it's almost inexcusable to blow as many opportunities as they are in some of these games. I think they left a lot of points on the table in this game. They did against Texas A&M too. And, you can get away with that against mid-tier SEC teams. You can't get away with it against Georgia. You might not even be able to get away with it against Auburn. We'll have to, see how that story unfolds. But I do think you can see the potential. You can see that when things are clicking, the team looks so good, like they did in the fourth quarter tonight. But the intensity with which they are playing is variable from quarter to quarter. And I know that's the exact thing that drives Nick Saban insane.
Yeah, and we know that because he literally alluded to that for week after week after week, leading up to that loss, of course, in College Station. If you're tuning in right now, it's Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. We appreciate all of your comments. Keep them coming. Want to get your thoughts on this game. If you can potentially put your cigar down while you're watching here, if you sit the cigar down, give us a comment. We appreciate that. A big bright spot for the Tide, at least, again, maybe not consistent all the way throughout, but towards the end of the game when it really, really mattered and Bama needed to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, was this offense that really started to click, do what was necessary. And Bryce Young, you look at some of the numbers, 31 of 43. I mean, that's pretty impressive. For 371 and 2 scores in the air. And then add in, Matt, we were talking about this, Bryce Young on the ground, turn into a dual threat guy. I think a lot of fans have been begging for that for weeks. Bryce Young kind of making the run an option for him at times, scoring twice on the ground, coming up big in some certain plays, Matt. It's nice to see the guy do what's necessary in situational football.
For sure. I mean, I think I don't know why it's starting to kick in more often for him, but we did hear fans sort of calling for that in the first part of this season. They wanted to see Bryce Young take off and run it more. And it was smart for him to do it tonight. That for whatever reason, he was not seeing a lot of open receivers for big stretches of this game, particularly in the third quarter. And he found a solution by looking for an opening and taking off with the ball when it was the smart thing to do. I don't think he made any dangerous decisions running the ball tonight, except for maybe sticking the ball out over the goal line during that one play. It still worked out for him in the end, but I think Saban probably would have preferred he just, go down after the first down marker and let your offense punch it in. Sure. But other than that, I think he made some really smart plays tonight with his legs, and I think it's good to see him getting more comfortable doing that. It's ultimately he's going to be called upon to do that in some crucial moments later this season, and it needs to be part of his thinking. It needs to be part of the way he operates.
Yeah. Speaking of the run game, can we all just take a moment to applaud Brian Robinson and the effort that this guy has put forth in the back that he has become for the Tide? For some reason, it did not register with me throughout the game that the guy scored 3 touchdowns, went over 100 yards. But, I mean, sometimes Brian Robinson puts up, like, sneaky, impressive numbers. Sometimes the guy is just super dominant, and then sometimes you get done with the game and you look at the numbers and you're like, dang, man, you really got after it. He's become such an incredible option for Bryce Young in this offense to have him now like a veteran guy in the backfield and able to make plays and really just overpower some defenders at times. I can't say enough about what Brian Robinson I feel like has brought to this offense now 8 games into the season.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the line you want from an SEC starting running back, 26 carries, 107 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, and it was not that. It wasn't in big chunks. I mean, really, I think his longest run of the night was for 15 yards. It was just slow and steady.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating. I think there were times watching the game where I thought, is this the right move to be giving Brian Robinson the ball and getting these small chunks of yards? But it paid off in the fourth quarter. Tennessee was gassed. They did not want anymore by the time the middle of the fourth quarter rolled around. They just couldn't handle it anymore. And, that's what you want to see. I mean, you get about 25 carries for about 100 yards, and it means that you probably were able to run for a first down anytime you needed to. Mm-hmm. Of course, it didn't always work out that way tonight, but I think Brian Robinson is incredibly consistent. He's got a lot of power. He's very, very good in the red zone near the goal line. I think he has really become a reliable threat for them.
Yeah.
Near the goal line in a way that they obviously didn't really feel like they had earlier in the season. So that's a great thing for Alabama's offense to have too, is they now know if we get the ball inside the 5, Brian Robinson's probably walking into the end zone at some point if we just give him enough opportunities here.
Yeah, his 1 touchdown run in the fourth quarter, man, it was just like to kind of put the game away. He just like broke tackles. I mean, it's unbelievable the way that the guy can power through it. And just, I don't know, I'm impressed with him every single week.
For sure. I mean, I think that people always want to compare Alabama running backs to another Alabama running back, but Mark Ingram's the guy that he still consistently reminds me of the most. Yeah. Just sort of a very balanced, smart runner who, it seems like arms just sort of slide off of him.
Yes, for sure. All right, so I've got a couple comments all the way throughout since we began the show about how important this win was going into the bye week. And it really cannot be overstated that you need to not only get a win, but do it in a dominant way. Bama, of course, did dominate in the fourth quarter, but there are some things, a lot of things rather, that do need to kind of be looked at. They need to be readdressed defensively, like we've seen again throughout a couple of games. Matt, I don't think that we can overstate how important it is to go into the bye week with some momentum. Bama has to come back and, of course, close out the rest of the season. So not only to have a win, but to do it in a way where you can kind of look at it and say, all right, we did some good things here. It's not like we had to pull it out in the end. Bama did put Tennessee away eventually. Significant enough and important enough moving into the bye week now.
Yeah, I think you're never going to feel terrible about yourself when you hang 50 on a rival in a big game. But I do think there are some pretty clear areas that Alabama knows need the most work. I think communication in the secondary has been a consistent issue throughout the season. They've got to get it patched up somehow. They've got to find a solution, even if it's just simplifying what they're doing. That you can't have guys going uncovered deep in the secondary. It just cannot happen. You can't hand the other team free touchdowns like that. The other issue, I think, is offensively, can they figure out a way to play with some sort of rhythm? Can they find a pace that is comfortable for this offense? Because I think they're scoring. They're putting up really good numbers. But it sort of feels like they're hitting the reset button every play, if that makes sense. There's not a flow to this offense yet. They are kind of making it up as they go along, and they've got the talent. Yeah, they've got the talent to pull it off. But eventually, I think things are going to, you're gonna face a team where the way you get an advantage over them is that they're not ready every single play. Every time you get a first down, they're on their heels. They're not ready for what's coming next. You've seen it happen before. We've seen it at Alabama when an offense gets into a groove and it seems like every single thing they do works. This offense, as good as they are, has not really found their groove yet. And I think that's the thing that they need to find in the back half of this season.
Yes, no question. So Bama on the bye next week before more home games, really. 3 straight: LSU, New Mexico State, Arkansas, then, of course, the Iron Bowl. So only 4 games left in the regular season. It has absolutely flown by. Bama now 7-1, 8 weeks into the year. Nick Saban said he's, quote, really happy to beat Tennessee. It's a rivalry game. This game means a lot to a lot of folks. So y'all enjoy your cigars, enjoy the win. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. But the thing is, at least you got to, sit there and watch it for 4 quarters. A lot of folks would have probably, yes, Bruce, I agree. Put them in for battle. But a lot of these folks, some of these games against Tennessee and other games, it's over sometime in the first quarter and the second quarter. So at least it was relatively interesting.
Look who's back. Look who's back in the comments.
Love it.
From this morning.
James, we appreciate your loyalty. No mustard. They didn't catch up. Absolutely love it, guys. Well, listen, Bama rolls 52-24. Matt, you got anything else?
I don't. I hope you guys have a good time tonight. I hope everybody enjoys their chosen stogie responsibly. And enjoy your 15th in a row, Bama fans.
Yes, enjoy. 15 in a row, 52-24, the final. Alabama over Tennessee in the 3rd Saturday of October. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in to the Alabama Postgame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone Eli. Have a great rest of your Saturday night and stay safe.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.